This guy is a blur on tape. He zigs and zags.
He's a complete freak of nature, maybe one of the biggest freaks that we've seen. Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna. This is 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins, live and in studio for the second time this week. Getting used to it, bud. We're here at the Player Personnel Symposium, just down the block at the Renaissance Hotel here in Nashville, Tennessee, the 5th annual one. Drew, we're going to talk about that later in the show. It's been a really good week. The good thing for us, we just try to blend in as much as possible. Get to be kind of like the team in the all lobby, right? You put the ears out there. One of the guys that I think one of the most talked about names in 2025 already, but I think further to cement that this week, Deuce Knight, currently committed to Notre Dame. Auburn's got some buzz there, but it just kind of brings a little bit more to it to life. Like, this is real stuff. Bullets are flying. People are trying to get these classes kind of buttoned up with the last couple months to go. But you kind of wonder, like, Deuce Knight, is he solid to Notre Dame? Could it be Auburn? But what else could happen with the rest of those 25 quarterbacks as well?
Yeah, Coop, it's just fun to kind of pick the minds of the best in the industry. I've been a sponge soaking it all in, but you're right. A lot of conversations in between sessions, and Deuce Knight is a name that continues to come up. And really, all the quarterbacks out there. I was polling some of the directors of player personnel about the push for arms in 2026, and a lot of schools have quarterbacks committed that they like. Do they love them? I don't think so. And then it circles back to 2025. Yeah, Deuce Knight, you said it. Our buddy Tom Loy continues to bring up Deuce Knight looking at Auburn. I think Ole Miss has been involved there. I'll say this. I don't think Deuce Knight is the only blue chip quarterback that is going to maybe change his decision here before we get into the early signing period in December. I think there's some other dominoes and flips that could fall. And you look at all the quarterbacks in the top 247, they're all committed, but 3 of the 20 have already flipped one time, and I think there's some more out there.
Could be an interesting week. We'll see what happens with Deuce Knight. And like Drew's saying, all these guys are committed inside the top 247. And without further ado, recruiting does not stop. That's why we had the transaction wire, and we're going to cover that. And one of those teams that we mentioned at the top of the show, how about Auburn, man? They just keep kind of putting it together on the recruiting trail, especially in 2025. They add to their class with one of the top players in the country, and one of the top players in the state of Alabama with Jared Smith, the number 19 player overall, the 5-star from Thompson High School, transferred from Spain Park. Drew, I think it's pretty safe to say maybe one of the more interesting edge defenders that we have in the class. We love the information. We love the background, the physical traits. We're still kind of waiting for it to catch up on the field. Your thought about Auburn adding Jared Smith?
Well, I thought Jared Smith, what he did in his spring game at Thompson, was the best on-field context we've gotten from him. And this is a kid that started off in our initial top 100 for the 2025 cycle. And why? He's over 6'6". He's got, quote unquote, 37-inch arms. I don't know how accurate that is, but he's got some levers out there. And then you look at how he moves in drills and how he's able to change directions. This is a kid with a basketball background, so he has a monster ceiling. I think right now we would say he's a lower floor prospect because we haven't seen it on the game tape. But again, back in May, limited series, Cooper, but I liked it. Covered a ton of turf, was working kind of as an off-ball linebacker. I think for Auburn, this is a huge addition, and it kind of just goes to what we have been saying. Yeah, we like what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. Cam Coleman obviously making some noise here in spring practices, but look at the defense. They are loading up on that side. I think that unit, that pass rush, has a chance to be one of the best in the SEC, and Jared Smith is yet another piece to the puzzle for them. Cooper, what also stands out, Auburn right now, of the top 10 ranked prospects in the Yellowhammer State for us, 8 of them are committed to the Tigers, right? Remember, Nick Saban's no longer in Tuscaloosa. Who's taking advantage? Hugh Freeze.
Hugh Freeze did a really good job of this last year. That's kind of been the foundation of what they've been doing. You mentioned the offensive side of the ball. They're really excited about that young receiving core that they have there, led by Cam Coleman, guys like Perry Thompson as well. You throw in Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Kane. There's a lot to obviously be optimistic about there on the Plains on the opposite side of the ball. Just look at those names. Autry, you go down the list, Jordan Crawford, Antonio Coleman, who, has been committed to 2 different schools 4 times.
Another name that I've heard a bunch at the Player Personnel Symposium, you'll like this one, Eric Winters. Apparently the guys at Catapult slapped a GPS on him, hit close to 23 miles per hour. I think what's also notable, Coop, right? I said it, 8 of the top 10 in Alabama, and then the 2 inside that top 10, Zion Grady, Naeem Offord, committed to Ohio State.
And they're still working on him. They're working on Offord. Obviously, Grady as well. Both those guys pretty close to each other, work out together during the offseason as well. So Auburn going to keep it charging there. 22 commitments already, up to number 5 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. Another team that continues to work their way up. How about Oregon, man? Dan Lanning, he never sleeps. Trey McNutt, he's in the boat. Pushed back his commitment not too long ago. It still ends up being Oregon. That's where it was trending. Drew, out of Ohio, the Buckeyes, Texas A&M, they're all involved. It ends up being Oregon at the end of the day. How big of an addition is this for Dan Lanning and the Ducks?
Well, Coop, he's our number 1 ranked safety. And I think the thing that stands out about Trey McNutt is the instincts and his ability to process and read on the back end. This is a 3-phase impact player on Friday nights, works a little bit at corner, a lot of wide receiver if you turn on the highlight tape, but I had a chance to see him play in the overtime OT7. I know it's a passing league, right? No contact and whatnot, but I thought Trey McNutt's ability to get from sideline to sideline and more importantly, make plays on the football. You need to do that as a safety. Haven't seen him a ton in man coverage, but you look at the athletic profile, and he's got the juice to do it. 5'11", 185 pounds, got some plus length in the arms, 4.67 in the 40-yard dash at the National Combine. Everyone knows that's a slower track. 31-inch vertical jump, 10.6 in the broad jump. This is a big pickup for the Ducks. Talking with some of their representation here in Nashville for the Player Personnel Symposium, I asked about Trey McNutt. They say the thing that stood out about him, he worked out for the Ducks 2 weeks ago at that Saturday Night Live camp. Big conversation point here at the Player Personnel Symposium. You want tough kids. You want kids that are there for the right reasons. And you want kids that are wired the right way. By all indications, Trey McNutt is this individual. He understood if he was going to commit to Oregon, they wanted to see him work out. I think they still liked him, but they wanted to know, okay, how bad do you want it? Trey McNutt obviously wanted to be a Duck, and he's really kind of the exclamation point on this DB class. You got Brandon Finney, Dorian Brew. Think about what they did last cycle. Aaron Flowers, Ife Ogundeji, who apparently is doing really well in camp. It's a really strong start for the Ducks.
Where does this secondary kind of fit in terms of the rest that we've seen out there? I mean, Auburn, we've talked about them. They're kind of sneaky. Ohio State, obviously, at the top. How good can this position haul be for Oregon?
I mean, you're putting me on the spot here, man. I'm going to ask you that. Top 5, we'll see. I think with the DBs, really, one of the favorite parts of the evaluation process for us is those All-American games, right? It's the only best-on-best setting we truly get with one-on-ones. And, yeah, you watch the senior tape. Some of these guys aren't asked to do a whole lot because they're the best player on their field. Trey McNutt's kind of in that. Sometimes you'll take these corners, you put them back at safety. All right, you are our center field. Don't give up a touchdown type of individual. So we like it right now. Hopefully we get Trey McNutt in the All-American Bowl. I think Oregon's going to have a good season. He might be there for some college football playoff practices. But right now, I'll confidently say top 5. I don't know if I could power rank them, but top 5.
I think that's completely fine. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. This is a good secondary. The other kid that we're super high on, and I think we're going to evaluate very closely as a senior, Brandon Finney, out of Maryland, which makes a lot of sense. We're coast to coast here at 24/7 Sports, but we're going to stay in the Big Ten. Ironically, let's talk about Maryland. Drew, very quietly have moved just outside of the top 25, sitting right now at number 26, and it helps when you go get a top 100 player like Jalen Gilchrist, number 91, the number 3 interior offensive lineman in the country. Drew, this is a guy that we really like. Missed some time last season with a collarbone injury, bounced back. Hudson Standish, got to see him in Baltimore at the UA Next series. Yeah, adding guys like Malik Washington, Zamir Smith, Justin Devon, the Terps, Mike Loxley, they're known as closers, but you got to like what they have going right now in August.
Yeah, last 3 finishes for Maryland on the recruiting trail, 38th, 36th, 31st. They're pacing for what could be one of their best recruiting classes of all time. And, Jalen Gilchrist is absolutely kind of a gem of this group. Georgia was sniffing around on Jalen Gilchrist. We list him as an interior offensive lineman, but you look, 36-inch arms. I think he's one of these guys that you could play maybe 4 spots up front. I think he'd give you some tackle looks in a pinch. I saw him 2 years ago in Baltimore at an Under Armour camp. He was one of the top dudes there. He was, his ability to punch, he's athletic, he can move. I like this. And then you look at Mike Loxley, Cooper, 29 and 33 since he arrived at Maryland. But he's put together back-to-back 8-5 seasons. They've won 3 straight bowl games. And I just like this group. You mentioned Malik Washington. We saw him at the Elite 11 finals. We think this is a guy that could play year one, year two. Well, guess what? Now you got Jalen Gilchrist blocking for him. The wide receivers you mentioned, Justin Devon, one of the more explosive individuals we have come across. You know, he's on 4-star watch in the top 247. We want to see what he looks like as a senior. Zymir Smith, a local kid, 3-phase impact player. Is he a running back? Is he a DB? I just think for Mike Locksley in Maryland, we're not talking about them enough in this new look Big Ten. Remember, this is a massive conference now. They could be a thorn in some team side if they're able to continue to recruit like this at the high school ranks.
As talented as that region is in the DMV, it just kind of seems like, you know, everybody's got their hands in it. There's not like one team that is established that says, you have to come through us. Penn State's had a lot of success there. You look around, what's going to happen with UVA.
Oregon's in there as well.
Right, Oregon's in there. It just seems like teams right now, at least the teams at the top of college football, can go in there with very little resistance. Maryland, Mike Locksley, smart to try to put up a fence around that area at College Park. Drew, let's stick with the offensive linemen. And if you're going to talk offensive line, who better than to talk about it with the Georgia Bulldogs, right? And Juan Gaston, another guy that we have in the top 247, big body, number 18 offensive tackle in the country. He commits to Georgia, joins the likes of Cortez Smith, Mason Short, Dontrell Glover. This class has a little bit different flavor than the ones that we've seen in the past, more interior bodies. Now you get a true tackle body with a guy like Juan Gaston. There you see 6'7", 345 pounds, Stacy Searles, Kirby Smart. They definitely have a type. Drew, the first thing that stood out for me is when we saw him in Atlanta in February. That weight, he's got to reshape his body. It's a little bit of a bad body. You put it in that category. That does not match up with the tape. I love the tape. Good foot, body quickness, strong at the point of attack. He's got a little bit of a mean streak, can play at the second level. I love this kid. Then you factor him into where he's going to be playing his college ball. More of a power scheme guy, probably going to be on the right side. But in terms of fit, I think it checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, you talk with people there in Athens. They love this individual. And Coop, you know, he was 382 in June. I've heard he has slimmed down a little bit. Excited to see, you know, the early senior season tape for him. And Georgia's going to start playing football, I think, this Friday, right? A lot of scrimmages there in the Peach State. I mean, this is just back to the well for UGA. Those other three you mentioned, Cortez Smith, Mason Short, Dontrell Glover, more interior options. I think, you know, two of those guys, Glover and Smith, could be potential centers, right, on Saturdays, and they get this big body. I mean, this is what Georgia wants to do. They want to, you know, wear you down at the point of attack. They want to hoard the mass. And, you know, for a team, you see that graphic right there. I mean, look how many offensive linemen they've taken. We talk about the scholarship total going from 85 to 105. It would be hard to think or envision a scenario where Georgia, now they have extra scholarships, they're not using it for the OL. They seem to be all about that unit. They continue to invest resources and time into it. Juan Gaston, just the latest monmouth of a human to take his talents to Georgia.
Big topic of conversation here in Nashville about what positions can you develop, what positions are easier to tap into the transfer portal market. The thing about Georgia, offense or defensive line, especially when you go to their two deep, there's no influx of transfer portal talent there. Those are all guys that they've acquired via high school and that they're going to develop. Also, we've talked about the price point. Once those big bodies get in the portal, we'll circle back on that in a second. Guys, just a reminder, you are locked into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. You can find Andrew and Ivins and I on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. A little bit of a schedule change. We'll also be on CBS Sports Network at 2 o'clock Eastern Time for the 24/7 Sports College Football Show. Excited about that opportunity. We had our first run at that this week. We'll be back next week as well. And Drew, we led with the Player Personnel Symposium, and you got to give these guys a lot of credit. Ed Manowitz at CAA, Matt Lindsay at Athletes First, part of the contingent that has put this group together in this symposium together. The fifth, I believe, Player Personnel Symposium had a couple years where it didn't happen because of COVID. They showed the picture of the first one, and it was pretty amazing. It was probably less than 100 people, I had to guess. This week was a little bit mind-blowing when you walk into the Renaissance Hotel and into the lobby, and there's over 600 player personnel and recruiting staff members from around the country, and you start to realize how much this side of the industry has grown, not only from a on-campus standpoint, not only from a player personnel standpoint, but now you have the split in departments that we talked about just almost like 2 years ago, like it was yesterday. You're going to have a college scouting side, and you're going to have a high school college scouting side. That's all here. So the investment, I believe, in player personnel and recruiting higher at an all-time high than it's ever been in college football. But Drew, I guess I'll just kind of pass you the mic here. Your biggest takeaway from this week, as college football is in an ever-changing landscape, and it seems like the recruiting and personnel folks are kind of right in the eye of the hurricane.
I think the first thing, Coop, is the NFL involvement, the NFL flavor. I mean, and from my perspective, this was the first year really there was a ton of NFL personnel kind of mixing it up with the college staffers and mixing it up with us. I mean, I sat at a table with a Broncos scout, and we were talking about positional value. And, you know, he wanted to hear from the collegiate side, you know, what are the positions you guys are investing the most in? And, you know, the college guys were asking him, you know, what are they allocating and what's the priority for them when they get out on the road? And then the other thing, Cooper, I think I met 4 or 5 former NFL scouts that are now at Power 4 programs running their collegiate scouting. These are individuals that used to go out on the road and they would cover all of the Big Ten, and they would go watch these guys work out, and they'd meet with the strength coach. Now these guys have been pulled into the college game where, talking with Matt Zenitz at 24/7 Sports, like the money is there. Like a lot of programs are investing a ton of dollar signs towards evaluation of your own roster and then the transfer portal. So you have these guys that have an NFL background that are familiar with, you know, kind of in-season scouting, and they're the ones that are running the departments at Florida. They're running them at Notre Dame. They're running them at Cincinnati. And these guys' sole job is to watch college football, grade these players. So when the transfer portal opens, right, remember we got these windows now, they're ready to pounce. It's not like, oh, did this kid play? No, we have a full write-up on him. So I just think the NFL involvement, I think we're only going to see more and more of that. I think new head coaches that are hired in this coaching carousel, you're going to ask for, all right, I need this amount of spots and this amount of money so I can build my department where we're competitive and we can retain our roster and we can get better through the transfer portal.
Mike Tannenbaum was here, former general manager at the NFL. You had some other speakers, former cap analysts of the Chicago Bears, obviously trying to address the revenue share and what that would look like. I think we're starting to see the NFL and college football kind of intersect more than both those two sports, the same sport, but different, obviously different leagues, one formerly being the traditional amateur league and the other one obviously being the one on a pedestal that everybody kind of looks at as the model. We've seen that these kind of intersect, and I think that was very intentional of the Player Personnel Symposium to try and prepare the folks in college football, especially behind these player personnel departments, for what's to come. And you think about the revenue share, the funny thing is it doesn't seem like there's one answer for how to approach this yet. And people will ask you, hey, what have you heard about it? And we're on the media side of this. It doesn't seem like, the funny part about this, these guys really aren't going to share information, share secrets with each other when it comes to that. I think it's going to be what we've traditionally seen in college football. It's going to have to be Georgia. It's going to have to be Ohio State. It's going to have to be Alabama to kind of lead the way and set the standard. And then what you're going to see is a lot of copycats outside of that. Not to say that people aren't going to be able to come up with their own process and their own philosophy. This rev share is so fascinating. And it's fascinating on the backs of watching Hard Knocks, the New York Giants, where you have this football front office that they take them through, and you got Joe Shane. He's trying to work through all these problems. It's not so much that, hey, we want a guy like Saquon Barkley back in the fold, but are we going to pay a 27-year-old $12.5 million a year with this guaranteed money? Those type of problems that were being workshopped in that episode, and I bring that up, are now coming to college football. Those are all really real things. How do you weaponize the NIL arm of your college football program on top of saying, hey, we have $10 to $20 million a year that we're going to have to break up across 105 players, and what does that look like? So the thing is like these aren't things that it's like, hey, this is going to happen 2 to 3 years from now. This is coming to your doorstep next year, and you're going from 85 to 105. That's a drastic change in philosophy, how teams are going to handle that. Now it's not just going from 85 to 105. You got 20 more scholarships, but now it's how are you going to pay 86 through 105? How are you going to split up all that money? So that's a fascinating part. I think you and I could go on about this in terms of how college football and the NFL are kind of hand in hand here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, last thing, I know we're going to move on here. I mean, me and you have talked about positional value with running backs, and you just said you got this sum of money. I think running backs in college football are going to get paid. I think it's going to be the complete opposite of the NFL. You mentioned Saquon Barkley. If you're a college team, I'm in win now mode. I don't care about the longevity. And I was talking to a few Power 4 individuals. Running backs in college can be game changers. So it's going to be fascinating, like you said, to see how these positional split ups take place, what type of deals there are. It's something to certainly keep an eye on. And like you said, I think everyone we talk to kind of has a different model in place, and it'll be fun to see which one becomes the standard.
27 in the NFL at the running back position is old. Saquon Barkley, his sophomore year of college, is probably his prime. Not to say in terms of the pinnacle of his athletic ability, but in terms of premium value from a financial sense, it would make a lot of sense for Penn State. That's what you think, right? Like C.J. Baxter, the situation he's in right now, it's kind of fascinating. So what might be devalued in the NFL could be something that is overvalued at the collegiate level, going to be something to keep an eye out for. All right, Drew, accelerate through this. The 30 under 30 list by Chris Hummer got put out this week as well. Interesting timing, as always, as we're at the Player Personnel Symposium. Everybody's got opinions about this. We'll zoom through a quick little background on all these guys, but a couple familiar names with former players making the list, now coaching. De'Aaron King, I think a lot of people will remember that name, De'Aaron King at Miami and at Houston, former player, cup of coffee in the NFL and the CFL as well. Drew, he just got promoted to the quarterback's coach at SMU. He's only 26 years of age, obviously has a connection to his former offensive coordinator, and Rhett Lashley, who's now the head coach at SMU.
He's a name to know, and I texted Chris Hummer when he was assembling the list, you got to get this individual on here. What prompted that? I was at IMG Academy last week, which is where Ty Hawkins, our number 16 ranked quarterback now, goes to school. That's where he's going to play his senior season. I was asking Ty about his decision to flip from TCU to SMU, and he said one of the big factors, there were many, was De'Aaron King, right? And De'Aaron King is someone he feels like he can relate with. De'Aaron King was a recruit, a high-profile recruit that had success at Houston, and he went to Miami, had a cup of tea in the XFL and the NFL. Now he's in the coaching game. I think De'Aaron King, is a rare breed. How many quarterback coaches are out there have played the game? How many quarterback coaches out there actually went through the transfer portal? How many quarterback coaches out there are familiar with name, image, likeness? Remember, De'Aaron King was at the forefront when it came to name, image, likeness. So he is certainly one where it could be fun to see the trajectory of his career, because he's kind of this new age quarterback coach. And I think as long as Rhett can hold on to him, they're going to be very attractive to these dual threat quarterbacks.
All right, another name on this list. This is kind of a blast from the past. Didn't even know he was in football. Ryan Switzer, you remember him? Dynamic receiver out of North Carolina. One of those guys that, I don't know, how old am I if he was on the college football game or not? Guy could go. Played a little bit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's at Tulsa now, the receivers coach. He's just under that 30 threshold at 29. Spent 4 years in the NFL. Was at North Carolina, 13 to 16. So he would have been on that last game. 4th-round pick in 2017. 2-time All-American as a punt returner. I thought, all right, is he just on this list because he's a former player? Drew, you actually like what he did last cycle.
Yeah, talking with Mike Roach, Hudson Standish, Gabe Brooks, our guys in the Lone Star State. Ryan Switzer can recruit a little bit. You look at Tulsa's recruiting class. Brought in Josh Smith, who had a grade of an 89 for us. Obviously, that's a borderline 4-star prospect. Also, Alex Green had a grade of an 88. They beat out some Power 4 programs for him. So another one where I think his ability to relate with kids, and certainly recruiting has changed, right, with the name, image, likeness, and all of what's going into that. You still have to want kids to play for you. Ryan Switzer has arrow pointing up.
For sure. Switzer, De'Aaron King, 26, 29. Chris Hummer does a phenomenal job with this list, and it's hard. Drew, there are a lot more guys we want to talk about on this list, but I'd be remiss if we don't talk about Carson Hall, because I feel like this is going to be one of those guys that's going to get clipped. If you don't know anything about this guy, defensive line coach at Western Kentucky, Tyson Helton. He's got 2 guys on this list. 2 of his top signees in 2024, defensive lineman out of Georgia, and it just feels like every great coach who's ever destined to be a really good head coach. Starts their career at Valdosta State. He played at Georgia, had stops at Illinois, LSU, in Georgia as well, excuse me. Now at Western Kentucky, but it just seems like football DNA-wise, I'll tell you, I didn't know anything about him this morning, but you read the resume and you're like, all right, I see the chops here.
Yeah, I heard from someone that worked a summer camp with him in June, and they said this guy's the real deal. I think as we get into the coaching carousel, let's assume that Western Kentucky has a promising season. I think the pieces are in place for that. He's a name that's going to come up when it comes to SEC schools. This is a rising star. Let's stamp him. Carson Hall, going to be in the SEC here very soon.
A couple more names on this list. Don't have time to talk about them all. Keenan Bailey, Ohio State tight ends coach. Obviously, a lot of people very fond of him. Malik Terry, I worked with at Oregon, spent some time with the Minnesota Vikings, one of the most up-and-coming minds, I think, in college football. Devon Brown, the other guy that we mentioned from Western Kentucky, spent some time under Lane Kiffin, guy that's worked his way up, now at WKU, and Max Steinecker, 24 years of age, Wisconsin general manager. Sometimes you hear that, you look at that, I'm a former personnel guy, and you're like, man, who are these guys getting these jobs? This dude right here, really enjoyed talking with him. I worked for Luke Fickell for like 10 minutes, but you talk about the fit. Obviously, we get to talk a little bit of ball, but he was super impressive.
Mason Posa is his background on his phone. The top 247 linebacker committed to the Badgers. Love picking his brain as well. And obviously, we continue to like what Wisconsin is doing on the recruiting trail.
All right, we got a commitment coming up right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel at noon, and it's a big one, Drew. 5-star wide receiver Kaliq Locket, the number 2 receiver in the country, out of the state of Texas. The hats on the table: Texas, Alabama, Florida State, LSU, and Texas A&M. Currently, Texas leads on the 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball. You, Mike Roach, will be here in studio being able to talk through that. The number 12 player in the country. Drew, talk us through Kaliq Locket, what these fans who are locked in, hoping to be the school that gets his services today. What are they getting in a guy like Kaliq Locket?
Well, I think you can make the case, Cooper, that he's got the best junior highlight tape when it comes to the wide receivers. It's right up there with Decorian Moore, who is our number 1 ranked wide receiver. This dude at the catch point, his ability to track the football, superb hand-eye coordination, can gear up or gear down to secure the prize, also makes those mid-air adjustments. I think he constantly wins with his release. That's what stands out to me. Very polished in that department. Perimeter playmaker. I mean, if you want to put him in 2 words, perimeter playmaker with that my ball type of mentality. Not the biggest individual, measured 6'0", 170 pounds, but he's got a near 6'7" wingspan, big 10-inch hands. I was searching for a player comp, and Coop, who he reminds me of? Jerry Jeudy. And you go back in there, Jerry Jeudy, Kaliq Locket, near identical measurables. Jerry Jeudy was 6'1", 177. Kaliq Locket listed 6'2", 173, both 4'5" in the 40-yard dash, both right around 4'4" in the short shuttle, both right around 34 inches in the vertical jump. Now, let's not forget, Steve Sarkisian had Jerry Jeudy for 2 seasons at Alabama. In those 2 years, 145 catches, 2,400 yards, 24 touchdowns. So we really like this kid. Another one, we're going to be excited to see him in the best-on-best setting at the All-American games because it's going to make it much easier to figure out who Kaliq Locket is.
High praise on Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, one of those guys, has it worked out in the NFL yet? Maybe not quite so far, but in terms of what he was in college, dynamic player. The other thing, Drew, all hypotheticals, right? That crystal ball has been proven to be wrong before. But Texas, this receiver room, Isaiah Bond, they bring over from Alabama, who'll be one and done there more than likely. Silas Bolden, they bring over from Oregon State. Matthew Golden, they bring over from Houston. I bring up the transfers because it's fascinating. It's not like this room doesn't have talent there already. You go down the list, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, all guys that we liked, all guys in the top 247. Didn't even talk about Ryan Wingo.
Who's apparently doing really well in preseason camp.
Texas, Austin, Steve Sarkisian, embarrassment of riches. Guys, like I said, we have a Kaliq Locket commitment coming up, the 5-star, the number 2 receiver in the country, right here, 1 o'clock Eastern time on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And if you're looking for that one, and if you've been with us over the last half an hour, just stick right here. Make sure to like and subscribe. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. We'll see you next week.